He was a typical 10-year-old boy. His loved ones say he marched to the beat of his own drum, he had a creative imagination, loved board games, and to sing and dance. Add all of that, plus growing up in a loving home, it should have been the perfect recipe for most 10-year-olds. And for Dakota Stevens, he could have had all of that. But he didn't. Why? Because his foster mother never gave him a chance.
I'm Elizabeth Millner for Law&Crime. Mechanical asphyxia, not really a term we see often. In science terms, it's when an object or physical force stops you from breathing. But what if I tell you, in this case, the physical force or object was Dakota's foster mom, who killed him by laying on him to the point he couldn't breathe. But was her punishment enough? Well, according to reports, it was enough that the law allowed.
Last April, 10-year-old Dakota was in a new foster home. According to a report by the Indy Star, his parents lost custody of him and his younger sister in 2018. So that was back when Dakota was around 5 or 6, and he was bounced to different homes ever since. Then he landed in the care of Jennifer Wilson. Dakota wasn't in Jennifer's home that long, just about a month. However, during that adjustment period, on April 25th, paramedics were called to Jennifer's home. They rushed him to the hospital, but sadly he died, and in a terrifying way. So what happened? Well, on April 25th, Dakota ran over to a neighbor's home. He asked that neighbor a simple yet tough question to answer. Will you adopt me? According to police, he asked his neighbor this because he said he was being hit in the face, and his foster parents wouldn't let him call his case manager. Dakota's foster mom, Jennifer, found him at the neighbor's home. But when the neighbor told Jennifer Dakota wanted her to call the police, Jennifer told her to mind her own business. Jennifer then was able to get Dakota back in the car and drive home. But it's what happened when they returned home that would have devastating consequences. When they returned home, Dakota initially refused to get out of the car. He got out of the car eventually. Likely still being upset, he screamed he was going to leave again. So what does Jennifer do to prevent him from leaving? Well, she sat on him. According to police, Jennifer didn't remember if she tackled Dakota or they just fell to the ground. But when police looked over at the ring camera footage, according to them, it showed Jennifer laying on Dakota's midsection. Now remember, he's just 10 years old, 4 feet 10 inches, a child. So the midsection where she was laying on was near his head and neck, all while Dakota was screaming. Dakota tried so hard to fight Jennifer off, he was fighting and flailing to get free. Then he went motionless. When he stopped moving, Jennifer thought he was faking it. His eyelids by this point, though, were already pale. She claimed she only laid on him for 5 minutes. But police say 2 clips from the ring camera video that ran about 7 minutes showed her sitting on Dakota while he wasn't moving. Another video showed Dakota still screaming, Jennifer on top of him, but her right arm and elbow are planted to the ground. Another video showed Jennifer on top of Dakota near his buttocks, while his arms were above his head, and he wasn't moving. One video showed Jennifer on her knee facing Dakota, who was already face down. It was only when he lost consciousness that Jennifer finally got off of him. She attempted to give him CPR and asked one of the other children inside the home to call 911. Police say Jennifer looked visibly distraught when they arrived. By this time, Dakota wasn't breathing. He had no pulse and later had to be airlifted to a hospital, but he was taken off life support 2 days later. Doctors say his brain was swollen and it was consistent with oxygen deprivation. The coroner's office ruled Dakota's death a homicide, and the cause was mechanical asphyxia. Dakota died in April of last year, but Jennifer wasn't arrested until July. She was found in a completely different state after a warrant was issued and a license plate reader detected her car. She was charged with reckless homicide, but ended up pleading guilty to that charge. Under Indiana law, that charge carried a max sentence of just 6 years in prison. So that's what she ultimately got. Earlier this year, she was sentenced to 6 years in prison with 1 year suspended to be served on probation. For Dakota, though, his loved ones will always remember him. According to his obituary, his smile could light up any room he walked into, and he truly had a huge heart. He loved the outdoors, he was a great big brother to his little sister, and his favorite teacher was a huge inspiration for him. But while sharing the great things about Dakota, one part of his obituary stands out, and it's that for those who truly love the 10-year-old, their hearts will forever be broken.
6 years in prison with 1 year suspended. Let's break this down with criminal defense attorney Serena Townsend. Serena, thank you so much for joining me today. In your opinion, was 6 years enough? It's been reported that the max time the statute allowed for reckless homicide in Indiana was 6 years, but do you think that was enough time given everything that had happened?
You know, I'm surprised that the maximum amount of time is only 6 years on a charge like that. I'm glad that she got the maximum because it seems like the judge's hands were basically tied to that maximum. He couldn't really do much more than that. And it seemed he even tried to add to it by adding that probationary sentence of a year after she's done with the 6 incarceration. So it feels like the judge did everything that he could to make it an appropriate sentence, but it does feel very low. I mean, this child's life was extinguished by this woman. So 6 years is a slap on the wrist when you think about that.
I want to give a huge thank you to Odoo for sponsoring us. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications. One of my favorites is Odoo's website builder. With their drag and drop features and AI copywriter, it helps me come up with website descriptions, like the site I built for my cat Buttons. It was pretty easy to set up, and just a couple minutes later, I now have buttonsthecat.com. So again, a huge thank you to Odoo for sponsoring our stories and getting me a website for my sweet cat Buttons. You can build your website now as well. The domain is free for the first year when you use our link odoo.com/lcnewsweb. Again, that's odoo.com/lcnewsweb for a free domain for your first year. In your opinion, was this a reckless homicide, or could there be an argument that this actually warranted a murder charge, possibly second-degree murder?
I think that that charge could have at least been presented to a jury. I don't know if a conviction would have been had on that charge because, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is a very high standard. And based on the facts of what had happened, it might have been difficult for them to have proven that she intended for this child to die. However, there was some proof that existed, such as bruising and other injuries, that indicated that there was maybe a pattern of abuse that could have led a jury down that path. They could have decided that she did have the appropriate mens rea, which is the intent to kill in order to, sustain a charge that high. So if it were me, I probably would have tried to present that and kind of seen if I would have been able to produce enough evidence to reach that level of beyond a reasonable doubt for a murder charge here.
And given all that happened, it doesn't seem surprising that she didn't want this case taken to trial. Instead, she pled guilty. But are you surprised that she didn't want to take the case to trial?
I think the evidence was pretty damning against her. I don't think that she's a sympathetic defendant at all. Sometimes you have people charged with heinous crimes, but they do have an explanation or a backstory or some type of mitigation to try to make things better for themselves. She does not have that, honestly. And I think that she cut her losses and that she, did what she needed to do to minimize her punishment. I don't think she would have been able to present evidence that was so strongly in her favor that a jury would have let her walk.
And I agree with you there. She wasn't a sympathetic person in this whole incident. And it doesn't seem like, I know a lot of focus on this is kind of the weight and just how much she weighed compared to how much Dakota Stevens weighed. But in the end, whether or not she was 300 pounds, 200 pounds, 150 pounds, sitting on a child to the point that they couldn't breathe, their eyes rolling in the back of their head, like that to me just is a horrible way, one, to die, but also a horrible way to treat a young child. In your opinion, what are your thoughts on just this whole tactic that she used to control Dakota Stevens just because he ran off to a neighbor's home for a little bit?
It feels exceedingly cruel to me. Your child misbehaves, you give them a stern talking to, you give them a timeout, you give them a homework assignment, you do something to teach them a lesson. We have to move away from corporal punishment. First of all, look at what happened. In this case, you never know what could happen if you go too far. But on the other hand, even if, you don't go too far, it doesn't really teach a child a lesson. And so, I think that she absolutely should have known better. She knows that she could have caused the damage that she caused. And this poor child suffered for no reason. I mean, trying to run away, to me, that sounds like a cry for help. To me, that sounds like he was trying to escape a terrible situation, and she was punishing him for that. Did he deserve punishment for trying to escape her? Maybe she's obviously the one who deserves punishment here. And so it's a very sad situation. Corporal punishment should never really come to that point. And so it just felt very cruel to me to sit there for 5, 6, 7 minutes while he was slowly suffocating underneath her weight.
Yeah, it's just horrible, horrible overall. And another thing that kind of stands out to me in this story is that Dakota Stevens wasn't even in Jennifer Wilson's home or in her care for that long, just about a month or so. And, as we've been talking, he's just a 10-year-old boy. He was bounced around from home to home. Obviously, there will always be an adjustment period for any child, especially going into a foster home. But what are your thoughts on just the fact that they weren't even together that long? And then it seems like her way of punishment was to treat him horribly and then fatally sit on him.
She's not fit to be a parent. She's not fit to be a foster parent. We have to do better. Our systems have to do better. If I am anybody who has any interest in this little boy's life, I am suing the people who placed him into this home, because 1 month and she kills him. This is like, how little patience does she have for a child? She had to have known that this was not going, no child is perfect, right? Certainly not a child who's been traumatized and through a system bouncing from home to home. Certainly she had to have been vetted. She had to have also been, told his tendencies, the traumas that he has suffered, and she had to know what she was getting herself into. Nobody's forcing anybody to be a parent, let alone a foster parent. You enter into this agreement, you enter into this trusting, relationship where the state trusts you to take care of this child and the child trusts you to take care of him. And here's what you do with almost no time at all to bond with this child. You, within a month's time, kill him. Again, that just goes back to what we were talking about. There's no mitigation here whatsoever. There never will be mitigation in a case where a mother suffocates her child to death. But there's certainly no opportunity to say, well, she tried her best. Where? How? How did she try her best if this happened in such a short period of time?
Exactly. And then Jennifer Wilson, she thought that Dakota was faking at first when he stopped moving. Even throughout all of this, it seems that Jennifer Wilson just had this horrible opinion about Dakota. She thought he was faking. She thought he was acting bad. She ultimately killed him by sitting on him. What do you think that says about how she treated other foster children that she's had, either those who were still in the home or even in the past?
It's a terrifying thought. Even that statement in and of itself, she thought he was faking. She's still putting blame on him after he's dead. It's like she's still kind of putting it on him, even though she's the one who did the terrible act. And God knows what she did with other children in the past, what she could potentially have continued to do if this hadn't happened, and draw, all the red flags possible. So, he almost kind of sacrificed himself for the betterment of any other child that could have entered their home or was already in the home. It is so sad and so alarming. Those children that were in the home and could have potentially been in the home would be living an absolute nightmare, I have to assume.
Yeah, and it's just horrible. I can't emphasize enough how terrible it is, because this isn't just abuse. Dakota Stevens died because of this, and children are already so vulnerable, especially foster children. In your opinion, what more can be done to protect children?
Again, it goes back to maintaining a certain level of intellect and care in our government services. You cannot just ignore the plight of children because they are without parents. These are the most vulnerable people in our population. They can't stand up for themselves physically. They probably can't speak up for themselves intellectually because they're still so young. They don't have financial means to protect themselves. These are people who if we're to be, entrusted with their care as a population, as a government, then we better do better. We have to hire the right people to oversee the programs that put children into foster homes. We need smart, intelligent, caring people who could actually vet these homes and these parents for safety. We need people who are not just going to go and check a box on a piece of paper. And we need to hold those people accountable, because if we don't hold them accountable, they will continue to ignore the red flags, the signs, and the issues that we keep seeing over and over again in the foster parent situation that we have going on here. It should not have taken a death for this woman to be taken out of the program, for children to be removed from her home and never to be placed there again. They should have known. If she was killing this child, it means she was probably abusing him and probably abusing other children. And where were the safeguards that should have been placed there before this happened?
Exactly. Where are the safeguards? Because now a young boy, can't even grow up and become the person that he was probably destined to be, all because of these actions here by his foster mother. Serena Townsend, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, though, in your opinion, was justice served here?
No, I don't think so, because 6 years is not nearly enough for the taking of a young child's life. And I also have to believe that there were more crimes committed by her leading up to that time period that should be, prosecuted, and she should be punished for those too. I do not think justice was served.
And I kind of agree with you there. Again, Serena Townsend, thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jennifer Wilson is already serving out her sentence at the Rockville Correctional Facility. According to online records, her projected release date is October of 2028. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.